So today we're going to talk about what I wish I knew on my first solo camping stock photography trip, and kind of why it was a failure and also kind of not. Hey guys, my name is Emma, and this channel is for talking about photography, sharing stories, and giving encouragement as you live life and delight in all things creative. Today, I'm going to share a story about the time that I went solo camping to get stock photography in Colorado, and I even showed up dressing the part. I had my hat on and the actual jacket that you'll see me in some later videos from the trip. And I'm going to talk about where it kind of went wrong. Even though it didn't go completely wrong, it did kind of go very wrong in the end. Back in 2021, I had this wild idea that if I went on camping trips, I could acquire stock photography. And living in Kansas, I decided that Colorado was the best option to go to. I mean, obviously it's insanely gorgeous. But the only thing was I was a solo female camper, and that can sometimes be scary. It wasn't my first time, but I'd never gone without my dog. And also I didn't know a lot about stock photography. And so I kind of dove in head first. Being a former gamer, I was like, let's just do this and see what happens. And unfortunately in gaming, that looked like me like bum rushing and dying a lot. So I should have learned from my past, but I did not. So because I live in Kansas, Colorado was the most obvious, easiest option. Also, in the fall, Colorado has aspen trees that turn this incredible shade of gold. They're the tall, white-barked, straight trees that are just magnificent. And because they get an early fall/winter, if the climate changes, if the temperature suddenly drops, then those trees will also drop their leaves. And so I got word that, hey, the trees look like they're starting to change, and so I didn't hesitate. I loaded up my car and I headed towards the mountains. Now, Colorado is no small state, and I kind of had my work cut out for me. I needed to both find a place to leaf peep and camp. And I wanted this to be an analog travel trip, and so I didn't want to really use the internet to plan my destinations. So I ended up using 2 books to decide on where I would camp and where I would look for aspen trees. The first book I used was called Colorado Camping, and it's a pretty cool book. It's full of information, and they helped me find pristine campsites, which are ranked by accessibility and beauty. Another book I used was Scenic Driving Colorado, and it helped me to find the best locations, roads, and routes for fall leaf sightings. The main route that I was headed for was called Kebler Pass. So as I continued to drive and turn after turn went around these bendy mountain roads, with much delight, I saw that yes, there were aspen trees and they were changing. It was such a relief and such a gorgeous drive. The only drawback is that those roads don't really have good options for pulling off onto the side and taking pictures. I mean, they do, they have pullouts because mountain roads need you to pull over pretty often in case you're having mechanical difficulties, but they weren't really good for quickly pulling over and getting a photo. It was easier to just kind of get through the pass to your destination. So that was kind of a drawback, but I got some beautiful footage in my car while I was driving anyway. I arrived in Salida, Colorado, which was my final stop before I headed north to my route that was going to be the scenic route to look at. I got some beer at a local place, and I got some beer that's canned in Crested Butte, Colorado, which is really close to where I'll be staying tonight, fingers crossed. So I might have an hour, I might have 2 hours ahead of me, I'm not really sure, but I've got a ways to go. I'm feeling good though. It's been a good drive, beautiful drive, and I'm starting to see some aspens changing, so I'm really excited for what is in store. Not too long up the highway, I took a very unassuming left off the highway onto the route that was listed on my map. It didn't really look like anything special, so I continued on this semi-paved and then eventually gravel road, and I got to see so many gorgeous views of trees and open areas, mountains, lone ranches, that kind of thing, until eventually I got to a full-blown aspen forest. Now, the thing about turning off this road is that I was basically leaving civilization. At least that's what it felt like. Okay, I was leaving cell service, which felt like leaving civilization. And so I was really dependent on the maps that I brought with me, and also that my GPS would somehow still track my location, even though I didn't have any service. I don't really know how that works. So I continued onward and was surprised to find actually quite a few people. There were people in trucks pulled over, they were just parked on the side of the road. There were small groups of photographers, and then there was also a cow crossing the street in the middle of the forest, which I didn't expect at all. I would pull over, stop, take pictures, soak in the scenery, listen to really good music, and then continue on down the road, hoping that I was on the right route to get to my campsite. Now, something I didn't mention about my campsite is that it was a first come, first served campground, meaning I could not reserve a site ahead of time. You would only know if you had a spot available if you showed up there or somehow knew someone that was there. Like, there was no way for me to find out if there was a spot available, at least not to my knowledge. Now, you might be thinking, Emma, why didn't you prioritize getting to your campsite first? It was a first come, first served campground. But my personal photo philosophy, and photos were the main goal of the trip, is to get the photo in the moment. I can't tell you how many times I'm traveling and someone will say, "Oh, we'll get that photo when we come back by later," or we'll get it on our way back. We'll get it tonight." And it doesn't happen. The photo doesn't happen. You're too tired, you're too focused on getting home, you're too preoccupied, you just forget. And then you don't get that really cool photo that you wanted. And so I was like, I'm gonna get the photos while I'm here and not worry about the campsite right now. I'm just gonna put that out of my mind. And so I did that, and then I continued up the road following along this gravel pathway through more aspens, seeing more hunters and trucks and photographers along the way. And I kind of started to lose hope that I was even going to find the campground, but with much relief, I came across the sign for Lost Lake Campground. Now, at this point, the sun seemed to be setting. I was in the mountains, and so it's hard to tell like when sunset is exactly, but it definitely was getting darker, and I was like, really hoping that there would be a spot for me when I got there. So I drive down this little gravel road that felt like it took forever, and I pull up to the most gorgeous view of a lake with mountains right behind it. They were practically like making out with the lake. They felt so close, and they were surrounded by trees and forest everywhere. There were wild animals. Well, there was one wild animal, at least a deer, and it was immaculate. Like, the 9 out of 10 scenic rating was merited. I absolutely loved it. It was gorgeous. But the views weren't really my goal of being there. I wanted a place to sleep. So I drove down and I looked for campsites, and none were available. There was nothing. I had nowhere to stay, and it was too late and too dark for me to risk going out and finding another spot to sleep. What I would do, I didn't know, but blame it on the grace of God or the slight worried expression on my face. Things ended up working out in my favor. And I will share the rest of that story with you in part 2 of this video. Please, by the way, don't ever show this to my mom. Also, the books mentioned in this video and my favorite gear are linked below in the description.